Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them.
For thousands of years, Mount Sinai has been the most contested mountain in human history.
This is the Holy Lands. Beneath my feet, just rocky desert. This is incredible.
The place where Moses was said to receive the 10 Commandments, yet whose true location has never been proven.
We're in Saudi Arabia, climbing the real Mount Sinai.
This year, archaeologists sent a drone equipped with ground-penetrating radar 100 times stronger than any previous system to scan one of the leading candidate mountains.
Saudis do block off these archaeological sites that we believe are linked to Moses and the Exodus, which prevented really high-quality video and photos from coming out to the outside world.
What it found shocked them. Beneath the rock lay straight lines, buried chambers, and geometric patterns no natural process could produce. If confirmed, these scans may rewrite the entire Exodus story. The Forbidden Mountain. What it uncovered could finally confirm theories that have stirred debate for generations. When the drone passed over the mountain, it did more than capture images. It revealed shapes beneath the rock, straight lines, buried structures, and geometric patterns that did not occur naturally. For the first time, there was hard data strong enough to challenge what scholars, explorers, and religious traditions had argued about for centuries. The scans indicated that the true location of Mount Sinai may lie in the far northwest corner of Saudi Arabia near Jabal Maqla and Jabal al-Lawz. This finding reopened a debate long frozen by the region's inaccessibility, government restrictions, and academic tension. To understand why this discovery is so disruptive, we need to examine both the arguments in favor of the Arabian location and those against it. Supporters of the Jabal al-Lawz theory begin with the Bible's own wording. In the book of Galatians, the Apostle Paul wrote that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. They argue that this was not symbolic language but a direct geographical statement placing Sinai outside Egyptian territory and across the water in the land known in the ancient world as Arabia. They also point to Moses after fleeing Egypt. He lived in Midian east of the Gulf of Aqaba, where he encountered the burning bush. If Moses already knew the mountain of God in that region, then after the Israelites left Egypt and crossed the sea, it would make sense for them to travel toward that place. Supporters say the physical evidence strengthens this view. At the summit of Jabal al-Lawz, the rocks are unusually dark, as if scorched, while the surrounding mountains are granite. They connect this to Exodus 19, which describes the mountain shaking, smoking, and burning when God descended upon it. Near the mountain's base is a massive boulder split cleanly in half with a smooth channel between the pieces. And the surrounding landscape shows signs of heavy water flow despite being one of the driest regions today. Believers link this to the rock Moses struck in Exodus 17. A large open plain sits in front of the mountain, large enough for a vast encampment, and long lines of stones appear to mark restricted boundaries. Supporters say these match the warnings given in Exodus, where the people were told not to touch the mountain or they would die. Nearby is a large stone platform that appears man-made. Some identify it as the altar Moses built during the covenant ceremony. Close to it is another simple structure associated by some with the golden calf with ancient depictions of cows and bulls carved into nearby rocks. A tall stone pillar stands alone near the site, and some claim it is one of the 12 pillars Moses erected to represent the tribes of Israel. Together, these features form a picture that many believe aligns with the biblical account too closely to be coincidental. Professional archaeologists and historians, however, disagree on technical grounds. They note that during Paul's lifetime, the Roman Empire had a province called Arabia Petrea, which included the Sinai Peninsula. Therefore, when Paul said Sinai was in Arabia, he was using the political geography of his time rather than referring to the Arabian Peninsula. They also point out that as early as 2000 BCE, Egyptian writings mention a region in the southern Sinai Peninsula called Thihat or Safit, which linguists identify as an early form of the name Sinai. This links the term to the Egyptian peninsula centuries before Moses. Another major argument is the absence of late Bronze Age remains. No pottery, tools, inscriptions, or settlement traces from the time of the Exodus. The features highlighted by supporters could belong to unrelated cultures from later eras. Scientists add that the dark summit rock is naturally occurring, that split boulders form on their own in deserts, that stone lines could be animal pins or territorial markers, and that the alleged altars show no signs of ancient ritual activity. For years, the argument remained balanced until technology shifted the landscape. In 2012, LAR scans in Angkor, Cambodia, stunned archaeologists by revealing an entire hidden city grid beneath dense jungle. Now, imagine a radar 100 times stronger than previous models, mounted on a drone and sent across remote Arabian Arabian mountains that were rarely accessible. That is what happened in 2025, and it has pushed the search for Mount Sinai into a new era. The drone has finally provided data pointing to a specific mountain, one whose patterns match the scans. But that discovery leads to a new question. Why that mountain? And who first identified this hidden site long before the world ever saw the proof? The layers of sacred ground. Archaeologists and textual scholars note that the ground at the burning bush was already holy before Moses ever arrived, a crucial detail often overlooked in the book of Exodus. When Moses approached the strange flame, the voice he heard did not say the land would become holy. Instead, it declared, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." This indicates that Horeb, the mountain of God, held sacred significance long before Moses encountered it. Because of this, many scholars believe Moses did not discover an unknown mountain. He entered a pre-existing sacred site. After fleeing Egypt, he settled in Midian, married into the priestly family of Jethro, also called Reuel, and lived among people who understood their landscape with deep spiritual awareness. As a shepherd under Jethro, Moses was not wandering aimlessly. He was moving through land shaped by Midianite beliefs where holy places were recognized and respected. Reaching Horeb, he stepped into a sacred space honored for generations. This idea that Moses encountered a mountain already viewed as divine adds weight to the later Christian history of the region, especially with the rise of St. Catherine's monastery in the 4th and 6th centuries. The monastery is now one of the strongest symbols linked to the story of Moses, but its origins reveal how later generations shaped the memory of that mountain. During the reign of Emperor Constantine the Great, Christian attitudes toward holy places shifted dramatically. Before his rule, Christians did not travel to sacred locations as they do today. Their faith was centered on spiritual truths, emphasizing that God was everywhere and that the true Jerusalem was heavenly rather than earthly. Constantine's conversion changed this entirely. Suddenly, the Roman Empire began identifying and protecting physical sites connected to biblical events. His mother, Empress Helena, played a central role in this new movement. Around the year 326 CE, she traveled across Palestine and nearby regions, searching for places tied to the life of Jesus and other key biblical moments. In the same era of growing pilgrimage culture, monks began gathering in the remote desert below Jabal Musa, the Egyptian mountain long associated with the biblical Mount Sinai. A simple belief drew these early monks. They wanted to pray near the place where Moses encountered God in the burning bush. Their devotion gradually took shape as what would later become St. Catherine's monastery. By the 4th century, a small monastic community had settled under the mountain, building shelters and welcoming travelers. They believed the valley beneath Jabal Musa contained the bush that burned without being consumed. Whether this tradition came from earlier local memory or developed during the new wave of Christian pilgrimage remains uncertain. But by the time the story reached Constantinople, the belief was firmly established. 2 centuries later, in the 6th century, Emperor Justinian solidified the monastery's importance. He ordered the construction of a fortified complex around what the monks claimed was the original burning bush. The structure was remarkable for its time, with thick granite walls, towers, storage areas, and a central church. Its purpose was both spiritual and protective, to safeguard the monks and preserve the traditions that had taken root there. Within these walls, the monks tended what they believed to be the very bush Moses saw. Now known as the burning bush of Sinai, it remains a living plant cared for daily for nearly 15 centuries. Monks have maintained it as a symbol of God's presence. Pilgrims often touch its branches or kneel beside it, imagining the moment when Moses first heard his calling. The monastery also became a repository of Christian heritage. Its library, one of the oldest in the world, second only to the Vatican, houses ancient Bibles, early Christian writings, and rare translations preserved only because the monks protected them. For generations, St. Catherine served not only as a spiritual center, but as a hub of knowledge visited by scholars, travelers, and church leaders. Another landmark within the monastery is the Well of Moses, believed to be the place where Moses first helped Zipporah and her sisters draw water. Pilgrims approach it with deep reverence, picturing the moment Moses shifted from Egyptian prince to humble shepherd. Yet, a question remains: if Horeb's holiness had such deep roots, why is there so little physical evidence from Moses' time? And this leads to the next mystery: if ancient people truly gathered at a sacred mountain, why does so little of their presence remain? The Exodus enigma. Archaeologists note that the Israelites at Sinai were not a kingdom, city builders, settlers, or farmers. They were travelers, shepherd families living in tents and moving from place to place. According to the Bible, they stayed at the mountain for about 1 year, a period so short that in archaeological terms it leaves almost nothing behind. A city leaves walls, workshops, temples, and burial grounds. A nomadic camp leaves only faint traces. Experts identify four kinds of remains such a group might leave, each of which naturally disappears over thousands of years. The first is hearthstones, stones and ash. Daily cooking fires require small stone circles, but wind scatters the ash, rain disperses the stones, and animals trample the ground. After thousands of years, these fires leave almost no trace, often only slight soil discoloration. In deserts, ash disappears within seasons. After 3,500 years, the absence of fire remains is completely expected. The second is post holes and light stone lines. Tent poles leave small round holes detectable only through extremely careful soil scraping. Stone lines that guided animals or marked small enclosures are even harder to identify. Later, shepherds, traders, and nomads disturb or reuse the stones, erasing the original patterns. The third is pottery shards. Pottery is usually the strongest evidence for archaeologists, but nomads carried very little, just simple bowls, small jars, and cooking pots. When these broke, the pieces were scattered across wide desert areas. Over millennia, the fragments mixed with pottery from countless later travelers, making them impossible to assign to one specific group. The fourth is buried waste and latrine pits. Organic material decays fully in open environments. Any human waste from the Israelites would have been destroyed long ago by bacteria, insects, and time. Even if hundreds of hearths, thousands of pottery fragments, and many tent marks once existed, they would have been spread across a vast plain. Over the centuries, the same area was visited by Bedouin herders, traders, soldiers, pilgrims, and other nomads, all leaving similar traces. Today, archaeologists find a mixture of remains from many eras, making the faint evidence of a single one-year camp nearly impossible to isolate. The missing evidence is therefore exactly what experts expect from a mobile population that stayed briefly. The problem is not that the Israelites left nothing. It is that their traces look identical to those of many other groups. In simple terms, the evidence hides not because it never existed, but because it blends into everything else. A second issue comes from the Egyptians, who many expect to have recorded the Exodus. Since Egypt documented victories, kings, and wars, it seems logical they would record the loss of slaves, national humiliation, and military disaster. Egyptologists explain why this assumption is mistaken. Egyptian writings served royal propaganda, not objective history. Monuments displayed the pharaoh's power, not his weaknesses. Events showing failure were deliberately omitted. Egypt followed a consistent rule of erasure. Major negative events left no contemporary record. The Hyksos expulsion, one of Egypt's most significant political upheavals, produced no inscriptions from the time and is known only from later accounts. The case of Akhenaten is even clearer. After his death, later rulers erased his name, smashed his statues, and rewrote history to eliminate him completely. If Egyptians erased their own kings, they would certainly erase any event portraying a foreign god defeating them. If the Exodus occurred as described, Egypt would have faced plagues, failed magicians, the death of the firstborn, including the royal heir, mass panic, slave escape, and the destruction of the chariot force in water. No Egyptian scribe would ever record such events. The silence in Egyptian records is therefore not surprising. It is precisely what historians expect. Together, these two factors create a predictable pattern. The Israelites left traces too light to stand out, and the Egyptians erased anything that threatened royal prestige. The absence of evidence does not disprove the Exodus. It aligns with what would naturally happen. The desert is silent but not empty. With careful study and modern tools, faint traces can sometimes be detected. Although the Israelites faded from view, their presence left subtle marks beneath the sands of thousands of years. And this is not the first time a people of Israel disappeared. Centuries later, the 10 northern tribes vanished under similar conditions. Could their fate have followed the same pattern? Traces scattered, records erased, leaving history to remember only the silence, a second Exodus. History records many disappearances, but few are as striking as the loss of an entire community. One of the clearest examples occurred in 722 BC when the Assyrian Empire invaded the northern kingdom of Israel. That invasion led to the sudden disappearance of the 10 tribes, a mystery that has lasted for more than 2,000 years. The Assyrian conquest under Shizar V and Sargon II was deliberate and systematic. Their imperial policy was to uproot populations, scatter them across distant provinces, and erase their identity. Archaeology confirms the violence of this campaign. Excavations at sites such as Gizar show smashed walls, burned public buildings, layers of ash, and arrowheads left where soldiers fell over 2,700 years ago. The northern kingdom did not decline slowly, collapsed under force. The Bible states that almost the entire northern population was removed, leaving only Judah in the south. This produced the legend of the 10 lost tribes. Modern research, however, shows the reality was more layered. While many were deported, thousands of Israelites remained in the land. They continued farming, rebuilt small settlements, and later formed part of the group known as the Samaritans, who preserved fragments of Israelite tradition. Meanwhile, others vanished into the Assyrian world. Some were absorbed into new regions where families were separated, languages blended, and customs slowly dissolved. These people did not die out. They simply stopped appearing in records as a distinct nation. Their disappearance through assimilation, survival without identity, is the heart of the mystery. The Assyrian exile forms a clear parallel to the Exodus. In the first case, the Israelites left Egypt and disappeared into the desert, leaving almost no physical evidence. In the second, they were removed from their homeland and dissolved into a foreign empire, leaving almost no cultural trace. One disappearance is geographic, the other is demographic. Together, they show how an entire population can fade without leaving ruins behind. Over time, traditions suggested the tribes did not remain in Assyria. Some may have moved eastward along the desert trade routes linking Mesopotamia and Arabia. These routes, including the incense and silk roads, were marked by caravans, fortified and spaced roughly 30 to 40 kilometers apart. They offered shelter, water, and markets along otherwise harsh desert corridors. If small groups of exiles traveled through these areas, their remains would blend with the countless traces of traders, nomads, and pilgrims who used the same paths. This possibility connects both disappearances to the same landscapes. The same deserts that hid the movement from Egypt could also hide the dispersion from Israel. In such environments, faint evidence can survive only in the smallest forms. Modern archaeology uses tools like ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and multispectral scanning to detect buried fire pits, stone circles for tents, and small refuge layers left by temporary populations. Long desert routes can be mapped to identify abandoned caravan stations, terraces, or settlement layers hidden beneath centuries of sand. Can an entire community vanish without leaving visible ruins? The Assyrian exile shows that it can. And if the silence surrounding the lost tribes is understandable, then the silence around the Exodus becomes easier to interpret. Recovering even the smallest traces of these movements could provide the first physical clues to one of history's oldest mysteries, cities in the sand. Archaeologists working in northwestern Arabia have uncovered settlement traces that shed light on the Midianites, the people among whom Moses lived before the Exodus. The Midianites were a semi-nomadic population active from the late Bronze Age into the early Iron Age. Their presence is marked not by large cities, but by small encampments, mining outposts, and tradeway stations. Excavations reveal structures built on simple stone foundations, often only a few meters wide, along with enclosures used for livestock. Most sites cover just a few hectares, reflecting a lifestyle based on mobility rather than permanent settlement. A major line of evidence comes from Midianite painted pottery. Identified by its red-on-buff colors and geometric designs, this ware has been found at numerous locations in the region. Sherds scattered across former habitation areas serve as dependable chronological markers. Radiocarbon dating of associated hearths and organic remains places many of these sites between the 15th and 13th centuries before Common Era, a period that aligns with traditional timelines for the Exodus. The pottery is utilitarian yet shows consistent local craftsmanship, indicating a ceramic tradition adapted to mobile living. Industrial activity appears alongside domestic remains. Excavations have uncovered smelting debris, including slag and furnace fragments, confirming the extraction and processing of copper and other metals. Historical sources describe metalworking as characteristic of this region, and archaeological evidence supports that record. Mining sites were situated near seasonal water sources, with small settlements forming around these industrial hubs. Surface surveys and targeted excavations have verified organized economic activity within a largely nomadic society. Stone structures provide additional insight. Rectangular foundations, low walls, and small enclosures dot the terrain. In several valleys, circular or oval stone arrangements appear to be tent bases or temporary shelters. Their sparse distribution reflects a social structure built around family groups and small trading parties rather than centralized authority. Animal bones from these sites, including sheep, goats, and cattle, confirm pastoral practices that supported frequent movement. Water management features further clarify settlement patterns. Archaeologists have identified channels, cistern, and stone-lined depressions designed to collect seasonal rainfall. These installations demonstrate a careful adaptation to the arid environment. Hearths and ash deposits near these water points indicate repeated but temporary occupation. The biblical itinerary of the Exodus lists locations such as Elim, Rephidim, and Tabra. Archaeologists note that these were likely seasonal encampments rather than permanent towns, consistent with the Midianite settlement model. Sites that correspond geographically to these locations contain minimal architecture, scattered pottery, and hearth remains, suggesting movement guided by water, grazing, and established trade routes. The trade routes themselves leave a measurable archaeological footprint. Caravan paths connected northwestern Arabia with the Gulf of Aqaba, the southern Levant, and northern Arabia. Along these routes, researchers have documented fortified way stations, storage pits, and animal enclosures. The presence of of Midianite artifacts along these corridors confirms their participation in regional exchange networks. Copper ingots, pottery fragments, and small tools appear repeatedly near seasonal water sources, marking patterns of short-term occupation tied to trade. Rock art and inscriptions add cultural context. Petroglyphs depicting animals, humans, and geometric figures appear across the region, offering glimpses into the symbolic world of the inhabitants. These findings raise an important question. If the Midianites already recognized sacred sites in the region, how might this pre-Israelite reverence have influenced the rituals and events later associated with Mount Sinai? The name and the fire. The name of the mountain offers the earliest clue to its significance long before the Israelites arrived. Some scholars trace the name to Sin, the Mesopotamian moon god worshipped across Mesopotamia and by early Semitic groups, suggesting that the mountain may have served as a lunar cult site centuries before the biblical narrative. This interpretation aligns with the orientation of certain peaks and high points toward celestial cycles, a common feature of early Semitic religious sites. Another explanation links the name to the Hebrew word sain, thorn bush, recalling the burning bush in Exodus. According to this view, local vegetation, especially acacia and other thorny shrubs that burn easily, may have inspired associations with fire. A third interpretation situates the mountain within the wilderness of Sin, a name possibly referring to clay or mud and reflecting the environmental character of the surrounding desert. Although the meanings differ, each interpretation points to a long-standing pre-Israelite reverence for the mountain and its use in ritual or symbolic practices. The biblical narrative emphasizes the unique nature of the tablets given to Moses. Exodus describes them as inscribed by the finger of God, distinguishing them from human-made inscriptions. The first set was broken when Moses confronted the Israelites worshipping the golden calf, an act that violated the covenant. Jewish tradition maintains that Moses preserved the fragments and placed them beside the intact second set in the Ark of the Covenant, symbolizing both the continuity of divine law and the reality of human failure. Physical traces connected to this narrative appear at the mountain's base. Archaeological surveys have identified stone platforms, enclosures, and foundations that may have served as altars or ritual spaces corresponding to biblical descriptions of covenant ceremonies and sacrificial practices. Hearths, stone-lined pits, and concentrations of small stone arrangements indicate temporary cooking areas and livestock pens. Simple pottery fragments confirm human presence, while scattered animal bones suggest ritual or domestic activity. Though modest, these remains match the expected footprint of a mobile community performing religious rites in a desert setting. The burning bush episode may reflect both symbolic meaning and natural processes. Thorny shrubs such as acacia contain oils that ignite easily, and desert conditions occasionally produce fires triggered by lightning or spontaneous combustion. Such burning could have appeared extraordinary to ancient observers. Archaeologists have documented scorched rock surfaces and charred plant remains typical of intermittent desert fires, providing a physical context for the fiery phenomena described in Exodus. The mountain's broader significance is reinforced by its geography. Its prominent peaks, striking coloration, and position along travel routes would have made it a recognizable landmark. Sacred mountains throughout the ancient Near East often served as gathering places for rituals, oaths, and celestial observations. Stone pillars and altars found at the site follow patterns seen in other Bronze Age ritual centers where mobile groups left durable markers to signal territory, sacred activity, or the approach to a holy place. Although the original tablets no longer survive, their ritual context can be inferred. The Ark of the Covenant, described in detail in Exodus, functioned as a portable container for sacred objects, and its presence at the mountain underscores the site's ritual centrality. Archaeological traces of platforms and enclosures near likely encampment areas suggest designated spaces for assembly, prayer, and handling of sacred items. These match the expected markers of temporary cultic activity: movable altars, simple boundary structures, and communal gathering points rather than permanent buildings. Material remains at the site reflect a seasonal and mobile population. Hearths, small stone alignments, and scattered pottery indicate short-term habitation, ritual preparation, and livestock management. Organic remains are sparse because desert decay and later disturbances remove most perishable evidence. Yet, the surviving artifacts fit the pattern of a nomadic community conducting periodic religious observances. The mountain's sacred status continued long after the biblical period. Later traditions connected the site with prophetic activity, pilgrimage, and eventually monastic life. Monasteries established from the 4th to 6th centuries Common Era demonstrate sustained reverence for the location. This continuous religious use across millennia suggests that the mountain's sanctity preceded the Israelite arrival, and that its ritual importance was maintained through persistent cultural memory tied to its distinctive landscape. Thanks for watching. Now, check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.